Our third panel is a topic really close to my heart. So being born and bred in New Zealand and raised on the principles of equality, freedom from discrimination, and with a focus on cultural and social development, I would like to welcome to the stage Oscar-nominated producer Emile Hertling Péronard, Luke Azevedo from Calgary Film Office, Meghan Beaton from Norwegian Film Commission, Lajla from the International Sami Institute, and producers Shelby F. Elwood and Michael Burkenbine. Emile and his amazing panel will discuss the importance of accurate representation in front of and behind the camera. Thank you, Emile and panelists. Please give them a round of applause.
Thanks, Jacqueline, and welcome everybody to the main stage and this beautiful panel. And thanks for the introduction. I'm from Greenland. I'm part of the Indigenous Inuit population there, so this topic is of course also very close to my heart. My entire career I've spent working on more authenticity in Indigenous film storytelling, in particular for my home country Greenland, but also on a global scale, working together with Indigenous film organizations worldwide to make sure that there's more accuracy, more cultural accuracy, more collaborations, more authenticity and better representation. So those are some of the things that we'll talk about today with this panel. I would like to just briefly have you all introduce yourselves, starting with you, Luke. We're on a tight schedule today, let's be honest. It's 36 minutes we have, so I appreciate the briefness. Thanks.
I'm Luke Azevedo. I'm Vice President of Creative Industries, Operations and Film Commissioner with Calgary Economic Development in Calgary, Alberta, Canada.
Wow, that was fast. Meghan, over to you.
Meghan Beaton, I'm the head of the National Commission for Norway.
Lajla Utsi, I am the Managing Director of the International Sami Film Institute. We are located far north above the Arctic Circle on the tundra there, in a small village.
Shelby Elwood. I'm the founder-producer at Cobrainy Media, and I make films that give voice to the voiceless.
I'm Mike Burkenbine. I'm CEO of Becket Film Fund. We financially support films that support underrepresented peoples.
Fantastic. Before we go into the discussion, we have two small clips that we would like to run. The first one is a presentation of works coming out of the Sami film community in northern Scandinavia, and is presented by the International Sami Film Institute and Lajla's organization. And the other clip is from Shelby's work, 4 different productions coming out of her production company. So please roll the clips. And it's the opposite order, but you'll get the point.
Hyvää huomenta, lapset.
Hyvää huomenta!
Regeringen har idag drøftet Alta-saken, og vi kan ikke imøtekomme deres krav. Sultestreiken trer herved i kraft.
Vi gir oss ikke før den siste bæres bort!
To all fathers out there, respect the sexual orientation of your daughters and sons. Shame on you haters. Follow me and I'll talk more about this later.
Hej, Elvira! Hej!
Min käraste.
Nå, Lär.
Fantastic clips. Thank you. Great clips from films that are either out in release or coming out. And I'm going to start with you, Lajla, from the International Sami Film Institute. We saw the last clip here, and it says, by telling our stories, we also tell our future. And I think that's a great point of today. The International Sami Film Institute is perhaps by European standards a small organization with a limited budget, but at the same time I won't hesitate to say that it's the most important advocacy institution for indigenous cinema in Europe. So you play an extremely important role. And I would like to hear just briefly from you, Lajla, the road you have taken over the years coming to where you are now, and why authenticity and these collaborations with producers from the outside, why that remains to be important.
Yes, thank you, Emile. Well, maybe start with saying that I went to film school in 2000, and we were a few Sami filmmakers who wanted to make films, but back then we only had one, which was Pathfinder, the Academy-nominated film by Nils Scope in 1987. So we couldn't get our films funded through the national film institutes in the Nordic countries, so we decided, okay, we need our own funding body that can really support our talents. So that's why we established the Sami Film Institute in 2009. And since then we have been building and supporting a new generation of Sami filmmakers, starting off with shorts and documentaries, smaller productions as everybody, and then now today standing at a crossroad where our filmmakers are taking the steps into the bigger productions, feature films. Many of the clips you saw are from feature films either released this year, coming out in the coming years. So there is a big increase in production, and also our institution, we are still fighting for the bigger money because we also need the same possibilities as everybody else.
And similarly to other indigenous populations where it has been difficult for you to make your own films previously, it hasn't been as difficult for outsiders to come and make films on your territory. So how have you worked with that, and how has that led on to the report that you have on your table and you will present in a little?
Yes, so the Sami people, as all 370 million indigenous peoples all around the world in 70 countries, we share the same history of colonization, assimilation, erase of language, cultures, identities, livelihoods. So that's the backdrop of for all of us. And yes, there is a long tradition of others telling our stories, where we have either been in front of the camera as exotic with our dresses or our traditions or songs and stories, and we have been production assistants or consultants, but those days are over. So we no longer do collaborations like that, and we encourage everyone who approaches us to really do meaningful collaborations that will benefit both parties. So we can learn, we want to be in the lead in stories where there are in Sami stories, so directors, producers, co-producers, writers, not only assistants in some departments. And we did a collaboration with Walt Disney Animation Studios with Frozen 2, where they approached us and the Sami community and wanted to do this production in a respectful and sensitive way, because it was very heavily inspired by our culture. So I was in the lead of the Sami advisory group, and we had a really good collaboration with Disney, and the film also was a huge success for Disney. So our stories also have economic value, but they have to benefit not only the big production company coming from outside, but there has to be value left and built in our societies. That's our take on it, and that's why we also made the Pathfinder guidelines to guide and give advice.
I know from working with you for years and years, this journey of also being approached over and over again by production and screaming and pulling your own hair and when reading these stories, and I definitely understand that as well. And I think one fantastic tool that you've managed to build on, I think, the back of all these experiences is the Pathfinder report. So I'm just going to ask if you can bring the slides on the screen, and I'll try to flip them using this little cue card. So, Lajla, if you can talk a little bit about Åfelash, the Pathfinder guidelines.
Yes, so Åfelash was a collaboration with the Sami Film Institute and the Sami Film Association a few years back after our collaboration with Disney, because there were so many outside filmmakers approaching us after that. So we really needed some guidelines both for them and for ourselves. So the Pathfinder's vision is that we want to be in the lead of the development of our own film industry, but we also invite and we value respectful collaborations, like for example with Disney. So this is like the main point of the report. And also that as Sami people, we want to have the power of definition when it comes to our stories, because historically we haven't had that opportunity, and we really feel it's time that we have that possibility, so that our voices are authentic. And there are some main principles in this report. So you should approach any Sami topic with a respect for Sami heritage and culture, and also history. And also we are discussing cultural appropriation versus cultural exchange. And then also, of course, United Nations UNDRIP, the Declaration of Indigenous, the rights of Indigenous peoples in the UN, they form an important basis in this report, and so does free, prior and informed consent. And we have also added with the right to say no.
That's a good point.
Yeah, so there might be projects that we wouldn't support or participate in. So meaningful participation, and also very important, benefit sharing. So what does your production give back to the people you are telling the stories from? And also an important point is that Indigenous peoples, by this UN declaration, we are protected with the right that we own our culture, we own our artifacts, our stories, our music traditions. So it's not something you can just come and take as you want. Yes.
Fantastic. And you can scan the QR code and download the report, which was released a few years ago, but now it's out in a new, improved and very beautiful, beautifully designed version. So please check that out. And what a fantastic foundation for this discussion, and I think that brings us very elegantly to you, Shelby, as a producer who's working with Indigenous stories, but as a non-Indigenous person, how do these principles and the work of Lajla, how does that resonate with how you work?
She stated everything very, very well.
Thank you, and good night.
Thank you. And I have a Muskogee heritage, but I was not raised in the culture, so I don't claim it. I'm not going to appropriate it. But I do have a deep sense of spirituality for the Indigenous culture because of my background. As a writer, I think as a filmmaker, you have to look at this from all the different perspectives. As a writer, it's your job to find out what stories are you telling, what do they mean to the people, what are the sensitive issues, what are the cultural issues, the sacred icons, the practices, the things that we don't have in our culture. In Caucasian culture, typically, and I'm speaking from the United States, so I'm talking Native American, and I've done some work with the First Peoples in Canada. So I'm looking at it from Turtle Island, but I think this would be the case talking to any group of Indigenous people. Respect that's written into the story. Respect is the most important thing you can give anyone. And when you're telling a story of someone else's culture, you've got to respect what's important to them. Once you understand, then you'll know why the tomahawk chop and Chief Wahoo are offensive. So it begins to make sense that you begin to know.
We saw some beautiful footage from some of your projects. Can you tell a little bit more concretely about how you have collaborated with protagonists or researchers and these Indigenous tribes that you're portraying in the films?
I was very fortunate. I was invited to do some music videos for a Grammy Award-winning flautist, Jonah Little Sunday, and there are places in and around central Arizona that are very sacred to the Indigenous nations that live there. So I invited him to join me, and we took beautiful footage of some of these places. That was to support his music video, but it also shows up so beautifully on camera that I added it. The other story had much to do with, or the one that you saw with the crown dancers. I was blessed to have them to come and visit our set and perform for me. One of the things as a director, because I did direct that film as well, the elder that I was working with, and I always seek an elder to work with to get the information straight. The elder said, "Don't stop their dance. They're doing a very special healing dance just for you. Don't call cut. Let them finish their dance because it's meaningful." So I wouldn't have known if he hadn't told me, but I value that tremendously.
And you see yourself continuing to work in that space and do collaborations with Indigenous.
We actually have a slate of about 6 more Indigenous films that we're doing between Native Americans and First Peoples. And this is something that I want to continue to tell the story because there is such a beauty in the culture, the traditions, the artifacts, and the religion.
All right, can we segue from that maybe to Mike? I know that you have collaborated. Mike, you've been working in film funding for many, many years. What are the economic benefits or incentives of, enhancing or prioritizing authenticity in these kinds of stories, which I hate to say is actually a new thing. I mean, in mainstream film culture, we didn't really pay much attention to Indigenous authenticity. We just kind of built stories around these cliches from cartoons or storybooks from the past. So, doing that extra work, does that pay off?
Absolutely. I have an MBA in entertainment, so I'm very different from the rest of these people up here from the University of Southern California. And one of the things we look at is marketing these films. And it's important because the stories need to be told, but they need to be told in an authentic manner. So if the main target marketer who you are telling the story about or for don't like it, or it's not authentic, then the press is going to be bad and it's not going to turn out well. So it's super important from a marketing perspective. And so as a financier and the CEO of Becket Film Fund, I look for that. I make sure people like Shelby are, following the organizations, talking to elders and making sure that these are authentic stories so that when we put them out there, they resonate with the target market and the stories are told, which is one of the main reasons that they would be greenlit by various people, First Nations people and others around the world. I think, several 100 million people around the world. That's important. And then also from a finance perspective, when these beautiful stories are put together, there are advisors that can make them authentic. You have to put financing together, and there are a lot of opportunities for financing. The group that put us up here, they have film incentives of various sorts. Canada has wonderful film incentives, and various states in the United States do as well. But working, in regional offices of Indigenous and First Nations people, there are other incentives as well. And so I look for productions that will hire people, as you said, not just in PA roles, but in greater roles, and then provide training for people so that they can move up the ladder in the production side of it as well, and make sure that those things all work well. And that helps the production look authentic and be authentic, because there's more eyes watching what's going on to make sure it follows what you would want it to be for your people. So you've got national incentives, sometimes regional incentives, and then there are banks that will loan money against these incentives. So if you have a $3 million film and you have $1 million incentive, you can take a loan out for some portion of that to actually get your film made rather than waiting to the end. And then where Becket Film Fund comes in is we put this package together, make sure the finances make sense, make sure everybody is going to be paid appropriately for their story, their directing, their acting, their production, and that sort of thing. And then the remainder of it is equity. So we bring equity to the table. And then we have relationships with major and mini major studios for distribution, and they're very interested in these films and these stories, because Disney was, that story was very successful for Disney. And when people see something like that, there is more opportunity then, and then everybody wins. People get their stories out, everybody who's working on the production gets paid for their work and that sort of thing, and reimbursements for donations can be made back to peoples to help with training and build training facilities and all those sorts of things.
Sounds like it's a good place to be.
It is.
Can you point to any tools or anything in the US that would safeguard these kinds of values that you're talking about when you look into a project or collaboration, checking a checklist of these things that you need to focus on? Are there tools available in the US similar to the Pathfinder's protocols?
Yeah, so when people present projects to me, I have a team that works with everything that's involved that we just talked about, from the story to the authenticity to who's producing it, acting in it, writing it, directing it, and then where it would be best placed in a theatrical release potentially, or streaming in Netflix and Amazon and those sorts, or AVOD. There's lots of places where these stories can be told, and so so we analyze this sort of thing using a variety of systems and data. So there is a large database that has 70,000 films in it, and it has all their financial data. So I use that information to analyze a project, and from that I can tell whether it would be best in a theatrical release, because the marketing dollars for a theatrical film are typically more than production. So that has to make sense. Or is streaming better? And people talk about to win, there are lots of ways to win, but dollars equal eyeballs. And so if you want your story out there, you can measure that by the number of dollars that it's generating, because the more eyeballs there are, the more dollars that flow in for everybody involved.
Yeah, simple math. And I think it's obvious to anyone here or anybody anywhere that these kinds of stories are becoming bigger and more successful. I mean, last year there was an Indigenous themed film here in Cannes, of course, Killers of the Flower Moon, a film that in the development process changed a lot when Martin Scorsese realized that this was actually a film about the Osage Nation rather than the white settlers. And that called for a higher degree of authenticity and subsequently an Oscar nomination for Lily Gladstone. So it really makes sense.
And good storytelling.
And good storytelling.
Along with it, and good acting. And there's certainly an actress out there floating in the world now that has lots of demand.
And I think that's been my thing all along. I mean, as soon as we find that spot, you will see how much creativity we have and how many fantastic actors and storytellers. So it's really about getting it out there. So thanks for that, Mike. And let's move a little, stay on the North American continent and move a little bit further north up to Canada, Luke. Killers of the Flower Moon, another film, Indigenous themed, that was very successful a few years ago. I remember we managed to get an on-screen physical screening at our film festival in Nuuk, Greenland during COVID of Prey from the Predator franchise, and you worked a little bit on that. Tell me how that came into place.
Yeah, that came into our region with Disney Fox, and it was done authentically. We had an Indigenous producer right from the beginning. This wasn't an afterthought, so they paid a lot of attention to how they were going to produce the film. We became an ally on it, ensuring that there was a connectivity to our knowledge keepers and to our elders, so that the story was told in the appropriate way in our region. 96% of the people in front of the camera were Indigenous. That talent, many of them from our local region as well. And then behind the camera, trying to facilitate as many people on the technical side as well, so that the film took on that Indigenous component to it. And so, from our perspective, when things are done authentically and in the right way, the results, as to what Mike was just saying, become obvious. It became Hulu's largest release of a feature film to date at that point, and really did set a gold standard for how these productions need to be done in the different regions throughout the world. In our region as well, we also have series work that's been done, Tribal, Blackstone, stories that are written, produced, directed, and show run by Indigenous peoples in our region. So again, we become the allies. We try to facilitate the work in a way that's meaningful, and then facilitate what's necessary from the perspective of the production to ensure that they are getting the best product on the screen. Over the last year, what we've engaged in is developing our creative economy strategy. And part of that strategy was to develop pathways for underrepresented and Indigenous communities. So speaking with the communities, we facilitate the financial aspect of it. Government was kind enough to put money forward to do the training. And then we go into community, we find the folks that are best suited to train the members of their area, and then we facilitate it. And at the end result, hopefully creating pathways into the industry for all communities that we represent. We are a bit of a unique location. As Calgary, we're the third most diverse city in the country. Approximately 33.7% non-white population. So we're trying to represent all our constituents and everybody that's in the communities, and ensuring that if their interest is in film and television, that we create those paths to get there. So,
fantastic. I'm wondering, because as an Indigenous filmmaker myself, and based on the European continent, we always look to Canada for inspiration in terms of Indigenous authenticity or autonomy, really, and with the introduction of the ISO, the International Indigenous Screen Office, and other initiatives to protect Indigenous storytelling and make sure that Indigenous filmmakers tell their own stories, while at the same time you have massive rebate schemes for international film productions. So how do you manage that?
That flow
of, on the one hand, attracting as many big international projects as possible, and at the same time being protective of what's uniquely Canadian Indigenous?
Years ago, there was a group that was struck, which was the Truth and Reconciliation Committee, which came forward with 94 recommendations. And so in my world, as part of the economic development area, we look at recommendation number 92, which is economic reconciliation, and that fits in every sector. So when we start talking about how we're incentivizing productions globally as well as locally, we try to facilitate it in the same manner. So a large production comes in from one of the major studios or streamers, they have access points to get their incentivization. They know exactly what to do. We also have a fund that is specifically for Alberta productions that enables our producers locally to be able to access. So we try to give the same support or more to our local producers as we do our foreign producers, enabling all those stories to be told to the world, giving access to infrastructure, ensuring that they have a competitive advantage going into the world, and putting them in a position where those great stories can be told globally and that there's an impact in our region.
And I could maybe direct the same question to you, Meghan, from the Film Commission in Norway, and how you see this interplay between commercial, international production and also Indigenous protection.
Right. So last year, our government made an update to our incentive to acknowledge the fact that it is a very successful policy lever to build up not only the Norwegian film industry, but also the Sami film industry. However, at the same time, our incentive is geared towards the largest projects with very large budgets and global distribution. So we've yet to see a project that has applied for or gotten the incentive, unfortunately, but I am really looking forward to the time. And I do feel very grateful from the National Commission's perspective that we have Lajla and the International Sami Film Institute. My experience resonates with what you say, that as soon as we let producers know that we have this institution with very clear guidelines, they are so excited and want to engage and discuss directly with them. So I define our position kind of in a different way because we have this structure in place, that we are an ally, but not an intermediary. So any sort of collaboration that would happen would have to be on their definition and what was necessary for them.
Is there a dialogue between you and Lajla as organizations to kind of, find the best practice to benefit both worlds, so to say?
Yeah, ever since I've started 2.5 years ago, I've had a dialogue together with them, but any sort of collaboration would have to be on their definition and what their needs would be.
That's the correct answer. I just want to, maybe both of you can add to this, but as a trend or as something that have developed over time, how sensible are the producers, the international producers that you are in touch with, when it comes to these kinds of stories? Do they, more than before, actually want to listen and adapt?
Since I started in 2021, I feel very lucky that, again, producers are really excited to engage, and I haven't experienced yet anyone that isn't really interested in real collaboration.
And from our perspective, we want to hear about the stories when they arrive in our region to ensure that they're following the path, as you were mentioning, appropriately, that they are engaging with community, they are engaging with the appropriate people so that they're telling the story in an authentic and appropriate way. So again, all we're doing is trying to be the ally and trying to ensure that the stories are being told appropriately. It would be extremely bad in our area to have stories being told by folks that are doing it inappropriately and having these stories go out into the world in that manner. We just wanted to ensure that if they're going to be there taking incentives to do these stories, that it's done properly.
And I could maybe go to you and Lajla with that question as well. I mean, from the International Sami Film Institute, how do you feel that the projects that approach you, are they getting better at listening and adapting, and do you use the point in your presentation where you say no?
Well, yes, there is, like I said also earlier, especially after the collaboration with Disney and the Frozen 2, we experienced an increase in interest from international big companies, big production companies who see the value of Sami stories. Very often we are approached by also documentary filmmakers all around the world, and what concerns us there very often is that they are very interested in this one single story about our people, and it's they want to follow a reindeer herding family from the migration, because they migrate with the reindeer from the inland to the coast in the springtime. So this is like the one single story everyone is interested in, and we have heard it so many times. Of course, to us it is an important story, because reindeer herding is also one of our main traditional livelihoods, and many of our people are reindeer herders, but still there is a lot more to our culture than reindeer herding. And yes, there have been actually some projects we have said we would not, we are not so interested to collaborate. So, yeah.
And then there was one project that actually, where you actually did collaborate after a few rounds.
Yes, so there is a feature film now playing at Netflix called Stolen. If you haven't seen it, you should all check it out. It just came out a few weeks ago. It was on Netflix top 10 for the first weeks. I think it's over 25 million people have seen it now, worldwide, what you are also saying here.
You're one of them.
So Netflix approached us, I think it's now 3 years ago, and they had bought the rights for this novel by a Sami author, Angelen Lestadius, and they wanted to produce this feature film, and wanted to collaborate with us, and we said yes, we can collaborate, but of course we gave them the Pathfinder and said, please read this, and you really need to have a Sami director, especially for this story, because it's so specific to reindeer herding, and you can't have someone from the south of Norway come, some big director from there come do this story, because it will be a totally different thing. And we managed to convince Netflix on this, so it is a debuting feature film a Sami director called Maria Eira, who directed the film, and it was a huge production. We had a Sami DOP, many Sami in the crew in different departments, so that was also a very good collaboration. We're very happy, and we are continuing to collaborate with Netflix also.
And I would say then the result is, with this collaboration and authenticity, then it resonates with people, you know, not only your people, but other people, and they can see that this story is authentic, and it raises the eyeballs.
Exactly.
Fantastic. I don't have a clock, but I feel we are running out of time a little bit. Am I right? 5 minutes?
6 minutes.
We got 6 minutes. All right. We're good. Oh my God. But then let's look to the future a little bit, because that was part of the tagline from the video we just saw, and you were mentioning, Lajla, just before, stereotypes, and I was at the Microsoft Beach yesterday seeing the Copilot tool and what AI can do for the way that we work. Are there any pitfalls with this future technology in terms of authenticity?
Yes, I am sure there are, but everyone is talking about AI, and it's coming for sure, and we all just have to relate to it one way or the other. And I also think that from our perspective, it is we have to see it as a possibility, how it can elevate our filmmakers, our talents, our stories. And this, of course, this Copilot you are mentioning, it's this AI tool developed by Microsoft. They are launching it now, where you can, it's like tailored specifically for the film business, so the whole pipeline from development, script, production, post-production, even marketing, and so of course it's an interesting tool, and then you can also put your script in there, and it can do anything basically, and also visualize. But that is an interesting point. We had an Indigenous film conference in Guodegate last year, and we had some guests from Australia, some Aboriginal filmmakers who are working very close with AI tools, developing an animation and a game. And they told us that when they were prompting the AI tool with, there was a very good example. So when they said, young hero, it would create images of this white, blue-eyed, looking very heroic. And if they would type young indigenous hero, a totally different picture would come. So a mishmash of indigenous dresses, and so of course it draws from everything online and everything that's out there. And we are minorities, so not so much of our content is out there yet. But yeah.
So it's a limited pool of information that this machine takes to create images that are the opposite of authentic, really. So are we going then in the wrong way in terms of authenticity? What do you think, Shelby, with this particular aspect?
I think we're much more cognizant now of the authenticity of indigenous groups, and we're trying harder to do it right. Some of the stories that are out now of reservation dogs and various other stories that are being told are trying very hard to get it right, and we owe them that out of respect always.
And maybe it's a good point to put into these protocols also caution to this kinds of stereotyping. Mike?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I look at AI as a supplement. It cannot, I don't think it can drive what needs to be. If you're having trouble with a little section, maybe AI will help. But I was there as well, and it for authenticity, it's not there yet. It may be at some point, but it certainly isn't there now. And then if somebody brought me a project like that had lacked authenticity, I would not come to the table with money for it. Okay. I was going to say, in general, with film financing, sort of a 101 for those that are looking for that. When somebody brings me a project that meets all these criteria, then I evaluate it and look at these film incentives, both from regional areas and states and countries, and figure out how much of that money can be used in advance. Then bring the equity that's needed for it. So equity would be like, cash that somebody's investing into the project, and it can come from a variety of sources, and then put a package together so that it works for the production in the lands where it needs to be, with the people, with the authenticity, with the elders and that sort of thing. And then also those sorts of analysis can tell a person where to distribute it by country. Different countries can have it released differently. In Canada, it could be a theatrical release. In the United States, it could be streaming. And so those sorts of things are very important for a filmmaker to understand and not have a dream it has to be in theatrical in every country in the world. That could destroy the finances. So you need somebody to actually look at that to see where these things are best placed.
That makes sense. And also in terms of AI as a tool, I mean, I think one of the issues that we're facing in Indigenous film community is a general lack of resources, not only financial, but also human resources, and any loophole that we can take into to make our productions easier will create more films, which is basically what we're here to do. Luke?
Technology is changing ever so drastically, and how it's utilized, how it's regulated, I think is going to be the difference. We just spent a good portion of a year through the strikes, and AI was a major component of that. So I think we're cognizant of the technology. We understand what's there. What we feed it is what it feeds back to us. So we have to be doing that in the appropriate way, in the authentic way, to be able to get the outcomes that are appropriate.
And I would maybe argue that in the age of AI, proper, authentic storytelling will be even higher valued.
Mm-hmm.
And
if it's utilized properly.
Yeah. All right. I'm gonna let that be the last words of this panel. I thank you, all of you. We still have 16 seconds, so I feel good. I feel good about this. Thank you so much for being part of this. And thank you all for being here.